The womb is magical in the way that, like, yes, it holds pain and imprints and trauma, but also it has the capacity for sensuality, for sexuality, for pleasure, for joy, for intuition. When they regularly cleanse their womb through their menstrual cycle, specifically in the bleeding phase, and also through womb clearing and womb reclamation, there's more joy to be found, there's more pleasure to be found. You've basically like released the stagnation, and so your capacity to feel is enhanced because you've wiped the slate clean.
Welcome to the Wildflow podcast with me, Charlotte Puanto, certified cycle and feminine embodiment coach and shamanic womb guide. In this podcast, I'll share my wisdom and conversations with powerful change makers, thought leaders, and embodied teachers to invite you to live cyclically in flow with your menstrual cycle instead of fearing it, to heal menstrual shame and normalize womb wisdom and period positivity, and to step into your sovereign magnetic power to create and embody the change you desire to see in your world. Settle in to unleash your wild flow. My guest for this episode is Shoshana Sadia. Shoshi is an empowerment mentor, menstrual cycle educator, certified consciousness coach, and holistic health coach. Their work is centered around balancing the feminine and masculine principles and breaking the stigma around all things menstruation and womb health to emotional empowerment and pleasure. Shoshi is dedicated to helping women discover their fullest potential and live an abundant and vibrant life. They believe that every woman has the power to dive deep into their body, sexuality, and pleasure, and work towards self-healing and greater spiritual knowledge. Through intimate, one-on-one guided mentorship, workshops, and group programs, Shoshana helps women to embark on a journey of self-love and soul learning. And in this episode today, we had a really rich, delicious conversation where Shoshi shared her journey of reclaiming their womb space as an energetic center, how they released all of past traumas and betrayals, and the process of reclamation, what it brought up for them, and how through this process they were able to connect with their sensuality, sexuality, creativity, intuition, sense of self and sovereignty. I hope that you find much magic and medicine in this episode as you tune into learning about ways that experiences and energy can block the womb and shut us off from our vital life source and our creative essence. Okay, welcome Shoshana to the podcast. It's really lovely to have you here. I'm so looking forward to talking with you today. How are you? And if you're happy to share, just whereabouts in your cycle you are. Just would love to hear if you have a menstrual cycle, where you are today and how that feels for you right now in your body.
Yeah. Okay. So, I'm doing very well in spirit. Physical energy is a little bit low because I am experiencing some symptoms of sore throats and common colds. So, not feeling 100% physically health-wise, but still very excited to be able to have a genuine, authentic conversation with you, to see where it lets us lead, to hopefully inspire and educate and, shine some light for other people who with periods or even without periods who may be listening. And where I'm at in my cycle, I'm at day 17. So, I'm not quite, for me, in that premenstrual energy. I have found personally that the way that I experience my whole cycle, meaning not just the menstruation part, but the full cycle, for those of you who are listening, is quite different to most other people that I speak to with periods. with menstrual cycles, because I have very gratefully, let me start by saying that, very gratefully, I have very stable energy and I have very stable emotions. So I don't experience the inner seasons, so to speak, if we were to use that as a framework or a blueprint, that vastly different from each other, until I'm at the very, very tail end of premenstrual into the bleeding, so that luteal in autumn into the descents of winter. Then I really start to feel, but up until then, it's like my body like loves to do high intensity exercise, like even on day 24, 25. And it's like, I listen to that because it's like, I have the energy. I'm not forcing the energy. I'm not pushing the energy. I'm listening to my body. And sometimes it doesn't want to do it, but as a general rule, it does. So, yes, I'm descending, like the very, very beginning stages of, I guess, into that premenstrual energy. But for me, premenstrual energy doesn't translate to maybe what the generic term of premenstrual energy is. And that's why I love having conversations with other womb owners and menstrual cycle humans, because it really sheds a light, I find, on how unique we all are and how we experience our periods, and not just our periods, but our whole cycles, so differently from each other. And that trying to get us cyclical beings to fit into a square just doesn't work, really, because it's like, I love blueprints and I love frameworks, and I think they're very useful. And some people, like, they when they experience these frameworks for the first time, it's like a light switch goes off in their head, or a spark goes off in their womb, and they're like, I feel so seen, I feel so understood, I feel so heard. And it really translates to their experience, their embodied experience. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is, like, that's not everyone's experience. So let's honor the diversity of representation of people who bleed within the framework of the menstrual cycle. That was a very long-winded answer.
Oh, I'm just sat here with a big grin on my face and just feeling like, because this is like, yes, yeah, I completely agree. I completely hear you. And I feel like the thing I'm always saying is, what's your unique experience of your cycle and where you're at? Because I was having this conversation with someone on Instagram this morning. It's quite funny.
Universe works like that.
Yeah. Just the way that the framework and the seasons, like, it's like you say, it's really powerful because it gives you a context to understand that you might feel different at different parts, and you are, as a whole person, you have different aspects to you. You have different energies and qualities and characteristics and different desires, and all these things that are available to us. And to consider that they might be connected to your menstrual cycle experience and show up for you at certain points. But when we start to see it as black and white, like, I feel like it's a very, it's the female gender has been for so long been told you have to fit into a box and fit it perfectly to be acceptable. And if you don't fit it perfectly, like, you're not good enough, you're not useful, you're not valid, you're not beautiful, you're not worthy. And so we are so inherently conditioned to try to fit and squeeze ourselves into boxes. And, like, we don't need something that's supposed to be essentially like a feminist thing, empowering through the menstrual cycle, reclaiming through the menstrual cycle, to then let that yet be another thing that we are beating ourselves up with and trying to force ourselves to be right or wrong, worthy, unworthy. It's like, can we not just do that? Can we have this conversation about, this is an invitation. You might feel like this, you might not. All is just as valid as the other. And I love that you know that your menstrual cycle generally feels a bit more even, and you know, you listen to your body and you can do the things that, you know, I guess classically, you know, textbook, like, don't do high intensity activity in your premenstrual phase. Like, you should be doing this. And it's like, well, it feels good to your body, so you're doing it. Like, hell yes. Can we get more of that sovereignty in knowing our bodies, knowing what we need, and making decisions for ourselves without it needing to be or being externally validated. Like, yes, more of that, please. So thank you for saying that and sharing that.
Yeah, you're so welcome.
I just wanted to share that I'm in fact, I'm not quite sure. I think it's day 22 or 23. My brain is starting to, I've had this thing where I get past ovulation and then I start to lose track. Because I've had so many cycles where I haven't ovulated, and they've been such long cycles that I've got this pattern of getting to the end and being like, oh, I've lost track, I've lost interest. And it's a real invitation for me to keep coming back and noticing and tuning in and being present with it. And this cycle, has been different again to last cycle where I didn't ovulate, and I'm feeling like mid luteal phase. Like, I don't know if I think it'll be, you know, into the 30s, day 30 perhaps, before I bleed, but starting to feel this shift in energy. And until now it's felt like just this rising kind of momentum, like this wave has just continued, and I've just still been feeling really like in a really good flow, and just feel it, everything still felt quite beautiful, I think, and I felt like there's this rich possibility in the air, and it's just had this sort of, you know, what I think some people might know as or experience as being a kind of typical inner summer ovulation feeling for them, knowing that absolutely not everybody feels that way. But for me now, I'm just on this, like, I'm feeling tired today. I'm feeling these energies and emotions surfacing, going, hey, remember me, I'm here, I want you to listen and connect with that. And so I love that you are here. I'm grateful that you're here even though you're not feeling your best. And I'm here, not at my quote unquote best either. And we're just human beings, just owning it, just embracing exactly where we're at, and not trying to put on a shiny persona.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that too. And I also feel like the more people who show up in this state in the public realm or the social media realm, the more permission it then gives for other people to be that way, you know. Not to say that you should always show up regardless and be consistent, but it's like, can you, or can a person, or can I still commit to doing the thing even though I might not feel the best, in terms of, like, not in terms of physical health, because often you do just need to rest and sleep, right? But in terms of, like, just say your energy's off, you're feeling low, like you're feeling heavy, you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, you're doubting yourself, those kinds of, like, emotions are starting to rise. It's like, can I still, you know, if you're an entrepreneur, like, can I still sell my group program if I feel like this? Or do I need to wait till a day where I'm feeling really shiny in order to do that? You know, can I still facilitate this workshop if XYZ? And if there's anything that the cycle has taught me, it is that, we do experience these different flavors, these different energies, and all of them are valid. And it's like, for me, the main reason, or the main motivator for educating and empowering women and people with periods to understand and have literacy with their cycle is really to bring in more self-compassion. Like that's my motivator. And what I find sometimes, and I find it very interesting, let's say the word interesting, is when people like really push, let's say other people who are in this field, menstrual cycle educators, menstrual womb witches, whatever, however they identify, or maybe they identify with many, who really push the agenda of like, understanding your cycle through the lens of like getting more shit done, or understanding your cycle through the lens of like, you can be more productive because you know the times that are best for doing that. And although that is so like, that there's definitely truth to that. It's not false, but it's like kind of missing the point. It's not the whole point. And if anything, to me, it reinforces this like insidious kind of like belief of like, anything you can do, I can do bleeding. And it's like, yeah, probably I can, we can, but it doesn't mean we should.
We are speaking the same language. I completely agree. That came up for me the other week. Exactly that. Like, just because we can doesn't mean we should. I don't feel for 1 second that is empowerment. That is not. It's the complete opposite. I think the fact that, yes, like you say, we might be able to, but that's completely contradictory against the point of what we're actually working towards. Like, the cycle teaches us that rest and integration, and that, even that fallow period of like finishing something and not knowing what's next and just letting it be, as well as, all the creative, the planning or whatever, all of that. It's all, our higher moods, our lower moods, our anger, our grief, our sadness, as well as the joy and, ecstasy that we can feel. All of it, like every ingredient is necessary to get the whole. And I just think, this whole thing of like, override your period, override your need, because this is what, like you say, this is what you should be experiencing at this time, or this is how to hack your cycle. Like, I hate that. How to hack your cycle.
I know, because when you think about the word hack, the connotations is to remove a limb, or to dismember.
Yeah. And
it's like, I don't want to dismember any part of my cycle, or remove any part of my cycle. The part of the cycle is all encompassing. So to remove a part of it really is going against the very essence of what the cycle is. It's like, it's taking all the ingredients of the cake and then just like saying, oh, only the flour's important.
Yeah. We only want the pretty cherry on top. Like, let's just hide the rest, totally. And, for hacking for me brings up, like the aggressive kind of cutting, but also it's like cheating. It's like we're just going to like hide that and break into it and cheat the system. It's like your cycle is not something to cheat. We treat our bodies as something that we can hack and override and cheat and like manipulate to, get around all of the problems that might come up and inconveniences. And, like the way we take, we can take things to, medications, hormonal birth control, which of course is an option for people, but we have to recognize the truth that it's an option for people who need it, and it's their choice, but they have to understand that it's a hack, it's a suppression. It's not fixing anything, it's just masking it and hacking it until the body goes, you really need to deal with me now, and speaks up through symptoms like, really painful periods or breakthrough bleeding or whatever else it is, mood disorders and changes, things like that. It's the whole thing. You've just really landed on something there for me. Like, this idea of hacking is and trying to cheat our way around, and rather than embracing the wholeness, is such a problem.
Yeah. And I feel like also, for people who do want to go down that route, that for me, where I feel like shitty at the system is that people aren't making informed educational decisions, because unfortunately allopathic medicine doesn't really offer you informed consent, like informed education. So it's like people, they're making decisions with only like just a fraction of information and none of the repercussions. Like, if people are making really well-informed decisions, fine. I'm all for everyone's sovereignty, and I'm never, is it my place to shame somebody for what they choose to do with their body? Absolutely not. It goes against every fiber of my being.
Yeah.
But I feel like the systems and the structures are set up in a way that are very disempowering, in a way, to people with periods and people with wombs, because it's all has been in the past very much based on a patriarchal system, down to like, even with C-sections. Like, I've heard of people like that obstetricians like wanting to book them in for C-sections because it works with their schedule. Like, to me, that is just, I don't have words for that. I don't even have words. It hurts. It actually hurts me. Like, I feel that energy in my throat, my chest, and it's horrible. It's not something that I want to experience, but I feel it because I feel the collective suppression of our, not necessarily our rights being taken away in this modern day and age, because we definitely have way more rights. But where it's come from, it's still got a long way to go, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I feel like we've been given rights, but ultimately it's still in service of patriarchy. It's like, here, have a little bit, but only because it suits us. Like, here, you can have a C-section if that's what you choose to have, but only in a way that serves us. And you can have, reproductive rights in this country, but yet the power is still very much in the medical system, in the way that you might get a leaflet with some medication that tells you, P.S. these might be side effects, but it's not giving you the full picture and all the information and alternatives and, long-term impacts in, beyond just short, these very specific physical side effects that may or may not happen. It's not the whole picture, and it's not the whole impact. So big conversation.
Huge conversation. Well,
I'd love to ask you, you are an empowerment mentor, menstrual cycle educator, and a certified consciousness coach and holistic health coach. I'd love to hear a bit more about the work that you do and how you came to, what your journey was, what brought you to do this work, what called you here.
Yeah, a bit of an unconventional route. I simultaneously, or not exactly simultaneously, but very shortly after, from womb work, got into menstrual cycle awareness. So I was in a emotionally abusive relationship for quite some time. And when that relationship started to deteriorate and come to an end, there was a lot of infidelity, there was a lot of betrayal, there was a lot of pathological lying, there was a lot of manipulation. And as it was ending, as I was processing everything and understanding what everything was and is, I didn't have any frame of reference for emotional abuse, psychological abuse. I didn't know what it was, so I was trying to piece all my sanity together. But what I did know and what I did feel was like absolutely cut off from my sexuality. Like I just felt so numb, so broken, actually. I felt so broken in my womb space. I felt like my womb had been invaded with this energy of countless people without my consent, which in one sense it kind of was, right? Because the energy of those other people had entered my womb over and over again through a long period of time. And it was, it wasn't just one person, it was multiple people over a long span. And I knew that it was something that had to be addressed, but I wasn't really sure how or what to do or where to even go about it. Who would I seek? Like, do I start typing into Google, my womb feels blocked, or like, I don't feel like sex with anybody, even myself, or like, because you're having these like thoughts, and also you're still trying to process the trauma of infidelity and betrayal and loss of house, loss of business, loss of relationship. There's just a lot. And so I think how it all started was I started attending women's circles. That was the first point. I started to feel seen and heard and accepted. And that was kind of like, I started to develop a safety with other women when I had felt very betrayed by the masculine and the feminine, actually.
Yeah.
So it was like, that was a really good stepping stone of starting to feel like, okay, these are sisters, they see me, I feel vulnerable, but I feel valued. And it was a really good like olive branch, a healing olive branch. And I started to develop a conscious community. I started to go to community events where people were on a similar page of, I guess, spiritual growth and spiritual healing. And it just eventually led me down the path to people who work with the womb and being able to kind of like access resources, information, meditations, other mentors who are like, this is their speciality or expertise, womb retreats, blah, 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 blah. And I did a lot of like womb recapitulation ceremonies, like basically like a reclaiming of the womb being my own space, like being my creative space, being a place for my pleasure, for my, just for myself. But I also had to kind of really go into the darkness of like what was lingering there, and there was a lot lingering there. And so that has been a bit of an ongoing process. And I've done many different shamanic womb ceremonies. I've done lots of my own. I've done womb journaling. I've done so many different practices that are connecting to the womb. Physical, emotional, spiritual, sexual, de-armoring, all of the things. And I'm in a really good place now. But that was kind of like that was the pain that really stepped me on the path to my purpose, working with this space. And then, being in the conscious community, already being like in the energy of womb healing and womb reclamation, I started to see like people on social media talking about their menstrual cycle. I'm like, what is this? I got really intrigued. I saw people who were dancing with like third eye of blood on their head and roaring and talking about the wild woman. And I didn't know any of this at all. And I was just, to be honest, it was just like a yearning to know more. I was like, what is this? Who are these people and why are they so passionate? And I was like, I need to know more. This is really, there was like a calling in my womb to just fucking research the fuck out of it. Just like research, educate, and then embody as well. But it started with just the research and education. It was very much like the masculine and yang practical parts of it. And then I started to embody all of that. So the yang came first and the yin came afterwards. And and then the more I got into the embodied piece and I started to learn my own body intimately and intricately, that's how I started to become more aware of and teach the unique blueprint of the cycle work. Much like you, it's in like, let's find your unique flavors and flow. And I also did have some struggles with menstrual cycle. Like I had the IUD non-hormonal coil in for quite some time, which did cause repercussions in my physical health for sure. And at some point I had very painful periods. But for the most part, I'd had a pretty like, what I would say like flowing, or like I hadn't run into too many challenges with my experience of menstrual cycle, of my menstrual cycle throughout my journey. So I didn't come from this place of like, I was on the pill for years, I was fainting, or I had endometriosis, or my periods were so painful I couldn't think or go to work or any of that. And it just led me into this work. It was more like this just divine curiosity spark from my womb after already being in that womb space, and like just a yearning to like deep dive head first, or should we say womb first?
Womb first, love it. Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing your story. I think it's so interesting to hear like what draws people in. And yeah, you're right. I do hear a lot of, discovering the cycle after being on a hormonal contraceptive, and then realizing that that's what it was for me as in part. And part of it was, for me, it was when I was first starting to think about like having kids. And I was like, I need to take myself off this and then start to understand what is this whole thing? What? It was so foreign to me. And that was that was the start of the path. But really hearing for you that this is been more of a journey of womb healing and reclamation and cleansing and reclaiming, it is your own center. And you mentioned in there that, you said you were like, how do I Google my womb is blocked? Yeah. Like, I just want to ask you, like, how did you know your womb was blocked, and what did that feel like or manifest like? You mentioned there that your sexuality had just completely gone. But kind of what were the signs for you? Like if somebody was listening who was like, like maybe that's a thing for me too, but don't know. I'd love to know what it was for you.
Yeah, interesting. So when I feel back into it now, my sexuality and my womb was blocked in that relationship towards the end. And towards the end of the relationship, the last year and a half. And it's not that I'm making this part of the realization now. I've done a lot of self-discovery, but I didn't feel safe. And of course I didn't feel safe if my fiance was around the world sleeping with other people and then sleeping with me whilst we were trying for children. Of course my heart didn't feel safe. And even though my brain didn't understand that, my yoni was like not opening, because some level of me knew that this wasn't a safe relationship, that I wasn't safe to unfurl, that I wasn't safe to unravel, that I wasn't safe to be my vulnerable self. Because sexuality, no, let me rephrase that, not sexuality. Having sexual intimacy with someone, especially penetrative sexual intimacy with another, requires a lot of vulnerability and openness and trust. That is the word that is coming through, trust. And I tried so many things. I took all the Taoist, like this was before things were even in the realm of being trendy, before there was reishi and chaga mushroom and cordyceps. Like, I've been doing this for many years. And I took all the Taoist herbs. I was doing sexual Taoist practices. Even then, I was doing the microcosmic orbit. Which if you don't know what that is, it's just a sexual practice to bring sexual energy from the yoni, the womb space, the vagina, or the vulva, into the heart, so we can marry those two energy centers. I was eating specific aphrodisiac foods. I was trying everything on the physical realm anyway. I didn't really know much about the energetics of things then. I was a health coach and a personal trainer, but I definitely wasn't super into like the spiritual, the energetics. That came later with this painful initiation. And I just find it fascinating that the body knew. And the body, like my body, like knows so many times, but the brain doesn't want to believe it, because the brain is trying to keep us safe. And it's doing its job. It wants to protect us. It wants to feel nurtured and held and in community, and it wants to belong. And so, there was times where like I would vomit on the side of the road, or I would be really shaken up. And then later I'd find out that was a time where he was with somebody else. It's like my body was picking up on those cues. But I was questioning myself and my sanity, because I was like, of course, like this would never happen. Like, of course. And so later on, what I knew to be true was like, I don't feel like I have any drop of sexual energy or libido in my body whatsoever. I was like, I have no desire for pleasure with myself, with others. And I knew that wasn't right, because I'd had that experience of loving my sexuality in the past, or loving, say, intimacy in the past. But it was like, I just didn't feel it, and I didn't understand why. But at the same time, what I did know was like, well, I'm processing trauma, and to a degree, like not sexual trauma in the way that I have been entered with. Well, I had been entered without love. Let's get that straight. But I hadn't been entered without consent. Well, I mean, there's a whole rabbit hole that I could go to with that. But let's just say, for layman's terms. And so I was like, I associated, what it was is like my associations, like what I made it mean was painful. Like I then associated all sexuality and intimacy with like pain, trauma, betrayal, loss, grief, despair, abandonment. That was the association. So of course it's going to be hard, but it's like I couldn't let that go on forever. And so it was like, okay, this has been a substantial amount of time. And I guess what it felt like was like, not only did I not have desire for myself sexually or others, but I also felt blocked creatively. And I knew a little bit about the energy systems and the chakras. And I knew that there was a correlation between creative energy and sexual energy. And so pieces just started to drop. I was like, maybe this stuff is related. And I just wanted to like feel empowered again. I wanted to feel empowered again in my sexuality. And I knew that somewhere deep beneath all the rubble I could. So like, Google, help me.
Help me. Oh, thank you for sharing. I just really I hold you with what you've shared, and just thank you. Holding you with love.
Thank you.
I love what you were just mentioning there about the womb, being tied in with creativity as well as, as pleasure, like sexual pleasure, but pleasure in general. And the womb, I'd love, for you to tell us, if you're happy to, a bit more about, what you uncovered in your womb in that process, your sexuality, your creativity. But was there more as well that you came into contact with and awakened when you worked with, cleansed, reclaimed your womb and that energetic center?
Yeah. To start with, it was forging and connecting, developing trust and a relationship, first and foremost. Once I got through that part of the process, it was the healing, and it was the being able to go there, being able to feel the depths of betrayal, being able to feel the depths of whatever it was that was there in its entirety. Now, what I found when I went into a lot of this work was rage. And I discovered there was like a very fierce, wild woman within, that when I really allowed her to be free, and when I supported her through a playlist or a track that would enhance that flavor, and I stopped caring about what people would think, and I maybe even told the people in my house, this is what's happening now, don't worry. And I stopped caring about how it would come across, or like I just didn't hold, I guess what I'm trying to say is I didn't hold myself back. And there was this real like fierce but also protective, and like this lioness came out, and she's still with me. And when I can activate her when I need to, and when I call upon her, I can invoke her. I can evoke that inner lioness deity within me. And she's fierce, and she's raw, and she's primal. And but she's also fiercely protective of her cubs, and fiercely like strong in her boundaries. So that was like an archetypal flavor that I discovered through the womb.
I just wanted to share, I have a lioness picture by my desk with I've sort of drawn out a lot of the words that are her qualities, because she comes to me in journeys and dreams, and I'm really journeying with the lioness at the minute. And
wow.
The things that you were saying there, and just like looking at this sheet, and there's like, there's these words and qualities that you've put there. And some other ones that I've got are, not being afraid to roar, like not being afraid to speak and express, and the courage, creativity, resourcefulness, intuition, intelligence, collaboration as well. So to be like a divine feminine goddess archetype. And I just think that that's so, there's been so many synchronicities in what you've shared and I've been experiencing too. It's quite funny. But I love that. I love that your lioness is within you and you can invoke her. And she's there to protect you and guard you, but also to help you to, to express, vocalize, move through, what comes up, from within, from your womb as well.
Yeah. And so, that's my journey. Everyone's journey is different, just like the cycle. The womb and the cycle are inherently connected. The cycle happens within the womb. It's housed within the womb space. And there's just so many different flavors within the womb, because as much as the womb can hold on to past imprinting of, like sexual trauma, being entered without love, even if it's being entered before you're ready, even if you have said yes. Medical procedures such as pap smears, hysterectomies, LEEPS procedures, any of the procedures that cone biopsies, any of those things that work on the cervix. If you get a positive pap smear and you decide to go down the route of having a cone biopsy or the laser procedure, there's many different ones. These are all the things that can be housed in the womb. Saying yes when you really wanted to say no, in relationship context, but generally these are all the things that happen kind of like within the womb area, are all the things that have the capacity to stay. And the analogy I like to give is like a bowl. The pelvis is, that's a bit wonky, although some of us do have prolapse. So it's like a bowl, and it's like every time you have words left unspoken and you swallow them down, they sit in this bowl unless you consciously choose to cleanse them and open the cervix, open the root. As you do, they don't go down into the ground and get composted by the earth. And that's the way that I see it, the analogy that I use. It's like, what are you bringing into your body, not releasing through your womb, through your pelvic roots?
Yeah. And I feel like that's what the bleed can do for us as well. It's when we're conscious with it, just letting it all be cleansed with that blood, composting back to the earth, but letting go of the energetic imprints of whatever is there, over the last cycle or even longer, that
lifetimes
we've been held onto. Yeah. I love that analogy of, it is the bowl and letting it open and release. Otherwise it just stagnates, right? Like water would in a bowl if it was there for too long.
Exactly. And you can, and also I like to see like the water or the bowl or the blood as like the feminine flow, and the bowl is like the masculine structure that holds, or the yang structure that holds the water or the blood. And then both of them need to work in union together in order to release and recreate newness, new life, plant that seed so freshness can start. So that the womb is magical in the way that, like, yes, it holds pain and imprints and trauma, but also it has the capacity for sensuality, for sexuality, for pleasure, for joy, for intuition. And often when working with people with womb owners, what I find is like when they regularly cleanse their womb through their menstrual cycle, specifically in the bleeding phase, and also through womb clearing and womb reclamation, which are other services that I provide, that we do regardless of whether we're bleeding or whether we still bleed or a menopausal. Once we have gone through the clearing and healing process, there's more joy to be found, there's more pleasure to be found, because you've basically like released the stagnation and now you've got a fresh canvas to work with. And so your capacity to feel is enhanced because you've wiped the slate clean.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Like an Etch-a-Sketch.
Yeah. I can, I love that. Yeah. And, to cultivate from that place, like if you know all the things that we've talked about, that heaviness and density is, if it's like a scale, if that's like the 0 and minus numbers, like to bring us from there up to, the higher end of the scale, like to its fullest potential, like expressing ourselves through creativity and tuning into our pleasure and awakening that and working with it and having a devotion to those things, even when it feels like, you're starting off for the first time going like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not creative. Pleasure's not for me. It's icky. It's like defining a new relationship with those things and just being open to expressing what your body and your intuition desires to express. So whether that's doodling and drawing or, making something or cooking or dancing and moving and just noticing the beauty of the world around you and choosing to wear things that feel good to you, just for some like really small examples as like an easy way in. I just find that can be a really powerful reframe of what creativity and pleasure means. And then it can go from there and expand as you journey with these. How about you? What's something that you what's your experience of tuning into creativity and pleasure, from your womb space? What's that been like for you as an awakening reclamation process?
Yeah. So I just also want to add that with I feel a lot of people can be easily put off or deterred because they might be trying to go from like 0 to 100. It's like maybe like me, they had no libido, and then all of a sudden it's like do this jade egg practice or use a yoni wand and do some like Taoist sexual practices, and it's like that you might not be there yet.
Yeah, I feel like that's for later on in the process, right?
Exactly. Or maybe you've just given birth. It's like you need to meet yourself where you're at. And that's why I love the menstrual cycle. And that the essence of my work is all about self-compassion and giving women and menstruators a reframe to love themselves when society tells them not to, basically, So with pleasure, for me, it's tuning into what's alive. That's how I frame pleasure. And it's going to be different depending on A, where I'm sitting in my cycle, B, how I'm physically feeling in my health. Like now, as I've got a sore throat, I might not want to do, sexual self-care. But doing a really slow embodied dance would feel really good for me. Massaging my foot would feel really good for me. Going for a walk in nature and just being with the trees would feel really good for me. And so what I find to be so powerful is asking yourself, am I doing this out of obligation? Because when you start to fall into, and I do fall into obligation, even with practices. And so it's a real fine line of like bringing yourself back. It's like, am I even doing these out of obligation? And how can I switch obligation to devotion? Because the outcome might be the same, but the root energy underneath both of those action steps is different.
Yeah.
if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
absolutely. Where are you coming at it from? A place of should or a place of desiring and knowing that, even in the moments when you feel like you're not in the mood for it and you're like, oh, I could not. It's like, sure, you could not, but in devotion, you're giving yourself the space and the compassion to just explore and go gently and to stop and to go and to see what's there without it being a performative, I've done it, tick.
Performative.
Yeah.
Exactly. And sometimes, like occasionally, we do need to push out of that comfort zone, and we do need to do the things that we don't want to do. And sometimes, like, the beginning point might be a little bit obligatory, a little bit like, this doesn't feel comfortable to me. This is not native to me. This is foreign to me. But then as we start to discover the benefits and really feel being the operative word, how the depth and the richness that it gives us, then it starts to come from devotion, you know?
Yeah, and I feel like that's the same with a lot of things. Doing anything new at first is hard and sticky and challenging and like, oh, I should do it. But yeah, like in devotion to yourself and your pleasure and your creativity, like that's magical. That's powerful, that is. And, I think there's a lot of women out there who are like, I don't have time for that, imagining like somebody frolicking around and being all indulgent and sensual.
Maiden.
Yeah. Like, I've got like real life things to do.
Yeah.
But, it's for everybody. It's for everybody. And it's a real, I feel it's like a real feminist practice to reclaim that for ourselves and not for anybody else's pleasure or benefit. Like, can we do things just for ourselves and that be enough?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's also a big one.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if anyone's listening and thinking like, oh, I'm sensing I've got some, womb blockages in here, and whether that's connected to expression or creativity, sexuality, sensuality, what if there's something that they would like to really uncover, what would your first step be?
Yeah, it's always breath, sound, movement.
Yeah, the embodiment trio. Yeah,
exactly. There is specific movements that really activate womb connection, and they tend to be womb spirals, womb undulations. So sitting up cross legs and doing the kind of Sufi swirls, on all fours like you would do like in a yoga practice, in the cat-cow practice, and then undulating, like maybe making like you've got little spirals on the base of your spine, or like you're painting. Doing that also on your back. Twerking, I can't twerk, but even like the action of trying to twerk, it activates that space. Shaking, but really focusing your mind's eye and imagination into the pelvic bowl whilst shaking and grounding. Sounding from the pelvis. So like if your pelvis had a sound, what would that sound be? And then pelvic presence. So like starting, like basically making your way around the pelvis, like as if the pelvis was a clock and you're starting at 6 o'clock and then you're just moving your way up the clock slowly, not necessarily with an implement, but just with your mind. And like asking questions like, what is here? If this had a color, what would the color be? If there was a shape, a texture, or a sound, what would that be? And without getting too much into your head about like, oh, I'm at this bit now. What is the color? What is the shape? What is the texture? What is the sound? Which can happen as well. It's more about like asking those, like having that in your awareness beforehand. Like, okay, if there's any colors or shapes or sounds or writing that wants to come up, I'm acknowledging that now. And then as you go through the practice, letting go of all that, because you've already brought it into your awareness, and then just seeing what wants to come through, but letting go of the attachment of anything coming through being profound or life-changing, and just letting it be, and being open to the receiving. Like, because the womb is a receptive vessel, right? It receives energy, it receives penetration, it receives the imprints. Like, it's a receptive vessel, and then it holds babies, it gestates, it holds creative seeds in the ovaries, which then break down into the fallopian tube, and then, you know, the then breaks down and becomes your period. So you know, it holds, it creates, it gestates, and it receives. It's just basically a magic cauldron of all the things.
It really is.
But I guess like the first thing is like connecting and just finding practices that like don't feel like, if you were to have 5 practices, one of them being a sound-based one of them being a movement-based one of them being more of a meditation, like, go out there, find someone who you resonate with. There's free resources on the internet, and just find something that speaks to you. I'm going to try this womb meditation. Cool, start there. Maybe just don't jump the gun too far ahead too quickly. Find something that meets you where you're at, or is just a little bit past your comfort zone, and just start the process.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. That's beautiful. And I find that those tools and practices are things that I do as well. It's been really powerful for me to really come back to my pelvis and womb space in that way. And I find that, you know, moving, like you say, moving from the pelvis and, you know, tuning into the intuition that lives down there and the sensations that are available within our womb, and just starting with just, you know, hands over your womb even, and just like, hello, I'm here, I'm listening. Super simple, just first way to then do anything with the womb. There's so many beautiful resources, and on that note, I would just love to ask if people wanted to find you and, you know, work with you or find your resources, your website, it's shoshanasadia.com, isn't it, your name?
Exactly.
Yeah. And your Instagram, what's that?
The Instagram is Shoshana_Sadia.
Okay.
So my first name and my surname with an underscore in between.
Okay, beautiful. And is there any other links that anyone can find, anything you have done, anything you have on offer?
I have a number of different free resources for women menstruators and womb owners. Various meditations, and also lots of guidebooks on connecting. I've got a womb connection guidebook. I've got a reconnecting to your feminine energy guidebook and meditation. So yeah, those 3 things are free gifts. And then at the moment I'm launching a 9-week live course called Magnetic Woman, which basically dives into the womb wisdom, the menstrual cycle education, as well as unraveling the patriarchy and the inner patriarchy, our sexuality, our sensuality, our magnetism, and much more. So that you'll be able to find that on my website, but the main place I hang out is Instagram.
Amazing.
And thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed hearing your story and the work that you do, and hearing more about, you know, your reclamation process. And I'm really grateful for you sharing that with our listeners as well on their own journey, their own path. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my love. It's been a wild, embodied pleasure.
Welcome to the Wildflow podcast with me, Charlotte Puanto, certified cycle and feminine embodiment coach and shamanic womb guide. In this podcast, I'll share my wisdom and conversations with powerful change makers, thought leaders, and embodied teachers to invite you to live cyclically in flow with your menstrual cycle instead of fearing it, to heal menstrual shame and normalize womb wisdom and period positivity, and to step into your sovereign magnetic power to create and embody the change you desire to see in your world. Settle in to unleash your wild flow.